we like to call the man with a plan, Dr. Claud Anderson. Dr. Anderson, welcome back to WOL Radio.
Well, thank you, Carl. Thank you for inviting me back. And how are you doing today?
We're doing great. We're looking for solutions. And you just heard, I don't know how much of you heard of the last conversation we had with the last guest. And she's coming up. She's created a legislation that she's trying to get through, trying to get enacted, but it's just stalling out at the gate, not getting any help that would set up a database that would, rein in some of these rogue police officers, either stop them if they get fired or move around. If they'd have a record in this database, so they couldn't be rehired. They couldn't do something in one jurisdiction and move on. And it's got a lot of other elements in it. But she's having a hard time getting off the ground. No support from any of our locally elected officials, civil rights groups, or anybody for that matter.
I did not hear the conversation between the two of you, but I do congratulate her for having the interest and enthusiasm and having conceived a scheme or a plan to try to mobilize and coalesce black folks. So I'm totally in favor of anything that anybody can do to help black folk in this country, because we're in deep trouble. Then do not pay any attention. I tell black folk on a constant basis, do not pay any attention to the sweet mouths in this country. That's those black folks you always hear on TV and on the radio or read in the newspaper that always talking about how black folk are progressing, how we should love all people, and how we are moving forward. And my mother used to say they can look through muddy water and always see dry land, or they can put a whipped cream on boo-boo. But I don't play that game with them. Right now, things are so bad in this country with black folk, I don't want to hear anything from any sweet-mouthed blacks. I want black folks to get off their behinds and start working to try to solve these problems. And this young lady is working hard, and she's an elected official. Please try to help her as much as you can.
All right, Doc, you said you're going to explain to us who really killed those 5 cops in Dallas.
But let me first of all let me preface anything I might say to you today. Let you know straight up on top. I'm not against anybody, but I tell people in every instance that I'm unapologetically in favor and supportive of black people in this country. And I know that historically, the black overclass in particular has always been cautioned and counseled never to do anything to identify with black folk. And as you know, our overclass is made up primarily of black ministers, black athletes, black actors, black civil rights leaders, and black elected officials. And see, in all my years in all levels of government, as you know, I've been almost at every level with presidents and governors and everything else. And even I was over the education for the state of Florida for 7 years. And when I first got into politics, one of the first things that happened was a very wealthy wealthy white person with his partner, and they're one of the richest in the darn state of one state. They came to me and told me, said, Dr. Anderson, you're the first black in the history of this nation that has an opportunity to be over an entire school system, education system in the state. That's everything from the nursery school to the graduate schools in both the public sector and the private sector. And so, since you're the first one in the history of the nation, if you play your cards right, you'll never have to work another day in your life. And I went home and told my wife that, baby, I'm never going to have to work again now. Shoot, I just keep my mouth shut and I'll be okay. But I asked the persons that were all making that offer, I said, what does playing my cards right mean? They told me, well, you got to stay completely, wholly away from any issues pertaining to black folk. And I said, oh, God. And so within a few months, I had all these problems popping up where he was finding black folk murdered here and there and beating the kids and doing the course of integration and all that kind of stuff and spraying mace in their faces and I can't even name all the things that was going on. And so I just told my wife, it looks like we're going to be poor all my life because I'm not going to let people sit around and beat up on black folk. And so anything I say to you today, Carl, I want you to know up front, I'm not against anybody. I don't have any dogs in the fights right now in politics. I'm out of politics. And I don't care which side wins, whether it's the Democrat or the Republicans. And I don't care which side wins or which candidate wins for the mere fact that not one on either side, here's one, and I'll tell you that in a second, that has made any commitments or any offers to do anything for black folk. Never.
Hold that thought right there, Doc, because we got to take a quick break. When you come back, I'll let you finish up and tell us about that candidate. 800-450-7876 to speak to the man with a plan, Dr. Claud Anderson. Taking calls next as the big show rolls on from 1450 WOL, where information is power. And thank you for staying with us. And our guest is Dr. Claud Anderson. If those of you with cell phones and smartphones, do me a favor and just text a couple of people and tell them to check out Dr. Claud Anderson. If you're in D.C., you can listen to us on 1450 or any of the Radio 1 FM stations, sub-channels, or you can listen to us online. If you're around the rest of the country, just text them and tell them to listen to us at WOLDCnews.com. All right, Doc, I'm going to let you continue what you were saying before we left for the break.
Yeah, well, what I was saying, Carl, since I withdrew from politics, having been with a presidential administration and with governors and been a chairman for a board of governors, I just got out of it because I found out pretty definitively that there is absolutely nobody seems to be really truly interested in trying to resolve the race problems in America and do anything helpful for black folk, and that's the problem that you just asked me about. And I'm pretty well convinced now, and unless we do some very specific things, you aren't going to solve the race problems in this country, because all throughout history, it's never been resolved, because on every instance, you're going to have sweet-mouthed blacks come up and sweet-mouthed whites that come up and do some very particular things that they've done as a model through over 500 years in this country. And we're going to talk about it as I go through my little discourse in a few minutes. And that's why you're not going to make any headway. And that includes up to the present administration and all the members of Congress and everything else. Because the problem is with the police and killing of blacks is that is not new, Carl. That is not new. That is an old situation. It's been true now for about the last 400 years. That's nothing new. When people pretend that, well, all we have to do is deal with some of the symptoms. We need to get more. We need to get more cameras on the policemen, and we need to stop racial profiling, and we need to have better training for them. We need to live next door to them or go to their school. All that's BS. That's a waste of time. Your problem is that you got a structural form of racism. As racism is structural, and as same as it was back in slavery time, it still exists right now. The policemen that you got a lot of excellent, good white policemen out there, and just like in every other situation, you got good policemen and you got bad policemen. You got good whites, you got bad whites. But the problem is that you got a structural institutional problem. You got institutionalized racism that goes all the way back in the history, and that has never been resolved or never touched. Now, and black folk were locked into slavery. Let's go back to slavery. That's where it all originated from. They were locked into slavery, and then when they got locked into the slavery process, it was approved, and it was approved by the United States Congress and by so-called founding fathers. But what happened, Carl, is once they set that system into place, what they did is that they want to make sure that any and everybody could benefit from slavery except black folk. So in 1790. They had an opportunity to solve the problem. They had it again in the 1860s and again in 1960. But I'm not going to jump ahead. I'm going to go back to 1790 when they set up the system. And determined in the Constitution that this is going to be the land of democracy. That'll be the cradle of democracy, land of freedom and opportunity for everybody. But they had a problem. If you're going to do that, then where are you going to get your labor force from? How are you going to get it? Because right now you can get free land by taking land from the Indians, but who's going to work the land? And so what they decided to do, and then when they met in Philadelphia in the 1700s, they spent a whole week saying, how do we get people to work? And we don't have the money to pay them. And finally decided they were going to use blacks as a formal labor class in this society. And they're going to classify them as 3/5 of a human being and property. And going to deny them of all rights, privileges, wealth, income, the rights to have a family, a religion, and an education. They set them up to be a foundation for building and developing this country. That was the problem. They set black people up as they brought them in, as they brought the millions into the country, and they also raised the millions. And then after slavery got outlawed in 1808, they started raising black slaves in Virginia, North Carolina, and Maryland to produce free slaves. But they used blacks as a foundation for building this country, to pick the cotton, to do the hard work, the labor class. They wanted blacks to be the labor class, and they wanted to bring in Europeans and other people from around the world based on skin color, going from white, yellow, brown, black, to come into this country and be the management class over black folk. And when they set that up, they said, now we're going to enslave all these black folk. We got to have some way to make sure that they do not revolt and do not riot based on the terrible conditions we're going to impose on them. When we work these people, 6 days a week, almost 12 hours a day, every day for 6 days out of a week, without food, without a family, without clothes, without anything else, they might revolt. So what they did then, every state and colony at that time passed laws requiring that they set up some kind of a force to monitor and keep black folk in line. So every state then and this was put into the Constitution. Every state then initiated what they call militias. Those militias went into effect after the Revolutionary War was over in 1789. The following year, they put these militias into force. The militia's primary responsibility was to monitor the roads and to make sure black folk did not riot or did not constitute an insurrection of any nature or did not constitute a threat to the dominant white society. And so they required by law that every white male from the age of 18 to 45 he was obligated to be a paddy roader, and which means he had to constantly put time in watching the roads and making sure there are no blacks on the road. They had to monitor the blacks on the roads and in the fields and on the plantations. And also along with that, they passed what's known as the Second Amendment to the Constitution. And I'm just amazed that I never hear any politicians, whether the black or white, ever put these issues together. That just blows my cotton-picking mind. I don't know where they got their education, since most of them in Congress and the Supreme Court should be lawyers. They should know this. They put the Second Amendment in there so they go along with the paddy rollers or the white militia saying that you must carry a gun. They didn't say carry that gun because the Revolutionary War was over to fight British. They were saying you must carry a gun to protect whites and white plantation owners and the wealthy class, the plantation owners. And so every white had to carry a gun, and they had to monitor blacks. That was put into effect, and into the Constitution. The Second Amendment went hands in hand with slavery. And so consequently, they as the militia began to develop, they set up the Refugee Act, which means that whites could go rescue blacks any place in the country, and that they escape from slavery, they can go pick them up and bring them back. And sheriffs and local police departments and agencies, all of them participated in that process of monitoring blacks and keeping them in line. And by between 1882 and 1892, at that point in time in history, let's say, for instance, you had all these various groups in the militia participating even after slavery. So when a black ran away, they could punish him. And then they gave the militia and the sheriffs and the police all authority to control black folk, to monitor black folk, and to protect the white society from black folk. They had all authority to do anything they wanted to do. That means kill them. You can lynch them. That's why between 1882 and 1892, they had over 2,800 lynchings of black men in America in that 10-year time period. They could do anything they want to black folk because the police' primary responsibility at that time was not about fairness and protecting black people or being fair to black folk or giving black folks justice or looking out for them. It was strictly to protect the dominant white society because whites were fearful of blacks. They were fearful of black slaves through insurrection and also through any kind of slave revolts. And even so, after that time, they put that into the Constitution in 1790 and as a Second Amendment. Now, they had a chance at that point in time to have given blackness the fairness that they needed. They could have corrected at that point in time. They could have eradicated racism at that time in 1790 by simply saying, let's go back and correct everything that slavery has done to black folk for over 360 years. Let's correct it. Since the whole purpose of slavery was to totally systematically distribute almost 100% of all this nation's land, wealth, power, resource, income, businesses, and controls of privileges and rights in all levels of government into the hands of the dominant white society and the other groups, the other skin color groups underneath the whites, which was in a descending order of acceptability, to be yellow, brown, blacks. Blacks were at the bottom. Anybody else could come into this country and be more acceptable than blacks. And then they said, based on that, we're going to maldistribute all the land. And so they gave away 1 billion acres of land from the beginning up to the 1880s. 1 billion acres of land into the white hands. That's why when George Washington, for instance, started it off, he got over 100,000 acres of free land. Thomas Jefferson got over 100,000 acres of free land. Patrick Henry, when he was screaming about give me liberty and give me death, he also said give me land. And he got 65,000 acres of free land. Every white person coming to America came here. They didn't come here looking for hard work. What the myth that they created about coming here looking for hard work and new opportunities. They could have stayed in Russia or China, wherever they came from. They had hard work. They came here to get the benefits of two things: free Indian land and free black labor. That morphed into what we now call the American dream. that even your present president in the White House today, Obama, is still working, talking about the American dream of opportunities for people coming to this country, coming here to get unearned benefits. And see, Indian land was free, and on that land, it was invaluable unless you had a slave. That's why President Jackson said that on the land, if you have land, it's black labor brings 70% of the value to the land. And so every immigrant coming to this country could pick up 650 acres of free land once he got here through the Homesteading Acts. And for every slave he owned, he got another 150 acres of land. And once they had passed out all this land, like for instance, when they developed the West, and then they opened up the West, in a 24-hour period, Europeans, whites poured in here and picked up over 2 million acres of land in 24 hours. The 13 railroad companies that went on business, they picked up 24 million of free land. But never could black people in the country get even 1 acre of free land. And so that created a racial imbalance of wealth and power and resources. And when blacks got set free, they couldn't compete because they turned black people loose after 360 years, and now you all are free. We're not going to give you any land. You're not going to have any clothes, any food, no housing, no tools, no animals, no resources, no education, nothing. Go out there and compete against whites because we are scared of you, and half of us are scared of you and the other hate. And so at that point in time, a national survey says that 98...
Right, Doc, hold that thought right there. We got to take this quick break, and I'll let you tell us about the survey. 800-450-7876 to speak to Dr. Claud Anderson, the man with a plan. Take your calls next on 1450 WOL, where information is power. And thank you for staying with us and our guest, Dr. Claud Anderson. We like to call him the man with a plan. He's getting around to explain to us what happened to those 5 cops in Dallas. He says it's all about racism and it's systemic. And you can read all about it. Let me tell you, his first book, best-selling book, Black Labor, White Wealth. That's a best-selling book not only in the United States, but in a lot of African countries and Caribbean countries as well. It tells us how we got into the situation that we're in right now, this very minute. His second book, which is a follow-up, is called Powernomics, and that's a roadmap that tells how to get out of the situation, how we can climb out of the bottom of the socioeconomic death trap that we seem to be held down in. Anyway, Doc, before you go, tell us how we can get the books, but I'm going to let you finish continuing your story about the contract.
Right. Oh, okay. They can get my books by simply going to the Powernomics website, POWERNOMICS, powernomics.com, and they can order all the books off the website. That's Black Labor, White Wealth. That takes you through about 1,400 years of history at about 200 miles an hour and show you every trick, technique, trade, and law that was used to put black folk into the ditch, into the social construct that they are presently locked into, and they won't be able to get out unless they make some very strong changes. And that, I don't mean the superficial stuff now they're dealing with about talking about the symptoms, but going back and addressing the issues I'm trying to recite to you right now. These are the things that are embedded in our Constitution and our laws that got black folk locked in boxes. If black folk don't address it, then quit worrying and crying about how you're being mistreated and being shot down the street. That will go on forever unless you go back and bring about some changes. And they can pick up Powernomics, the national plan, which picks up where black labor left off, that one along with 2 Dirty Little Secrets books that tells black folk why they are special people and that nothing has happened in this country and on this earth that black folk did not directly cause or were not indirectly involved in. And those 4 books can be bought in what we call a power pack. They can get all 4 of those books for $70 by either going to the powernomics.com website or they can call the corporate office at 301-564-6075. Again, they can call the corporate office. If they don't want to go to Powernomics website, they can call the corporate office at 301-564-6075, or they can go to mostly any Barnes and Noble stores, but primarily they go to the black bookstores who should have all those books, and get those, Carl. But it's tremendously important for black folk, and I'm going to work my way so I can explain this present situation with the killing with the police. But if they don't understand the things I'm telling them now, please tell them don't buy my books, don't waste their time, and quit crying about what's going to happen to them as black folk in this country. These are the things that are embedded, that there's a cause of all your problems. These are the causes of your problem. Black folk love to major in the mind and get tricked into dealing with the symptoms of the problem. How problems are not welfare, food stamps, over-imprisonment, black-on-black crime, high unemployment, and dysfunctional schools and dysfunctional communities. Our problems are the issues I'm laying out for you right now. If you do not correct the total maldistribution of almost 99.5% of all this nation's resources, power and wealth, and privileges and rights into the hands of the dominant society, you haven't got a snowball's chance. You cannot compete owning and controlling the one half of anything in this country. That means that whites right now control, every white person has 3,500 times more wealth than the average black. You don't own and control anything. And now that land, that billion acres of land that was maldistributed in those first 300 years, 360 years up to 400 years, that 1 billion acres of land, that could not only did the whites get all the land, but they got all the resources in that land, the gold, the silver, the chrome, the bauxite, the magnesium, the timber, the oil, and the gas. And that's what built the wealth up. And that's why they own almost 100% and 99.5% of everything of wealth and power in this country, going from Boston all the way to San Diego. And black folk are playing in a real-life monopoly game in which they own and control an insufficient amount to be a competitive group. Now, go back to your point. What I'm trying to say now, but when they had a chance to correct this maldistribution in the 1860s at the end, when the Civil War occurred, but right when the Civil War occurred, at that time, they took a survey, and 98% of all the whites in America at that time indicated they were not in favor of freeing slaves in the country because they were scared of the slaves. They thought the slaves would seek revenge and take over from them. And so they were totally against it. 98% was against it. And so but a few radical Republicans, they said, well, look, we got to correct the Dred Scott decision of 1857, which says a black man has no rights, black people have no rights that a white is bound to respect. And so what they did, after the Emancipation Proclamation, they enacted what's called the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. And they enacted that 13th Amendment. That became the intro to the second Constitution. And they had to have a second Constitution because the first Constitution is an affirmative action plan for whites. So they had to have something to ride that. And so they enacted the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, and 2 civil rights laws, 1865 and 1866, to give black folks some opportunities to get some resources into their hands. That's why Congressman Thad Stevenson and Charles Sumner and Congressman Benjamin stood on the House floors in Congress and says that in this country, there's only 2 things that a black man will ever be. You're either going to be a slave or you're going to be free. But minimally in this country, for a black person to be free, he must have at least 40 acres, a mule, and $100. And immediately that got killed off when Lincoln got assassinated, and President Johnson, he turned around and killed all that and say, give them nothing. Set them free. We can set them free with nothing. They can be set free with no clothes, no animals, no food, no tools, no home, no education, and nothing. They cannot compete this way because we have denied them an education for 360 years. It was against the law to teach a black man or a black person to read and write. If you get caught teaching them to read and write, it costs you $100 and 39 lashes. And they said, go out and compete. And they know they didn't have any money, no education, or nothing, no tools, and no land. But they had to go out and compete. And so they did set up, but the radical Republican did set up what's called the Freedmen Bureau. And say, in this Freedmen Bureau, we should give you some resources. And then as soon as they set it up, within a few months, immediately after, that was like in about September, before January occurred, they had taken and expanded that and corrupted it so that all the Southerners who had fought with the Confederacy could get the resources, and all the plantation owners could recapture their land. And so all the land in the South, and from whether it was owned by poor whites or rich whites, went back into their hands, and black folk got nothing. And so then the Southerners said, well, now that the war is over and we lost, but you're giving back all of our land, we now need labor again. And at that point, again, they said, well, we need the blacks. And the North says, good, because we don't want them to come north. We want Europeans to come here. And they cut an agreement where all the blacks got, again, locked into the South, back into what's called Jim Crow segregation, or into black peonage, where they're back in semi-enslavement again. And they had to stay like that for another 100 years because they broadened the whole concept. They said, what we'll do, we'll dilute the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment and pretend it was written for everybody. And the United States Supreme Court went along with that and helped do it. The United States Supreme Court, which was made up of basically racist whites at that time, 57% of all the Supreme Court justices were slave holders, and the rest since then was almost basically racist. And so they locked black folk out and gave them no resources. And so black folk then was locked into the same situation where all through slavery you had the white militia and the white police and the white sheriffs monitoring and using their authority, the authority of law, to be able to do anything they want to a black person. They could kill them, shoot them, beat them, whip them, do anything they want, and it would never be questioned during slavery. Well, when the North said we don't want the white blacks coming north, and we're going to keep the South states, you can have them all the states then turned around and enacted laws too, saying almost the same thing that the slavery laws had said during the enslavement period, that black folk then were back under control. And again, they set up different agencies to monitor and control black folk, whether it was the police or sheriffs or the Ku Klux, semi-cultural groups like the Ku Klux Klan, the White Citizen Census Council, the Knights of the Black Horse Brigade, the Nazi Party, Hitler Party, Tea Parties, all of them. They then functioned as surrogates, and they make sure that black folk were constantly monitored and kept under control, because the white society in the South, as well as the North, didn't want them, and they were still a bit afraid of black folk, and the South was still afraid of them, thought they were going to seek revenge and hurt whites. They wanted blacks under masculine control, and every southern state passed laws on gun control. They said, look, just like in the Second Amendment, we're going to need these laws for gun controls to make sure these black folk don't get out of line. And so right now we got about 367 million handguns and rifles in the country. Black folk were denied the right to have those guns, like during slavery, with the first anti-gun law went into effect about 1643. But no blacks could carry guns and weapons and tools. And during semi-slavery, which is called Jim Crow segregation, again, they restricted blacks' ability to have guns and weapons to defend themselves or get out of control and threaten whites. That's why they were successful in keeping black folk in order and in line under the authority of the police and law enforcement agency from the 1860s all the way up to the 1960s. Because they expanded those things that should have given black folks rights and privileges, should have given them some wealth and made them independent. They then broadened it. They made sure that the Southern whites and that from the Confederacy got the resources. And in 1960, they had a third chance to be able to help black folk eradicate racism in this society. But again, when black folk came up with the Civil Rights Movement and the Black Power movement, Senator Moynihan then in 1968 sent a memo over to President Nixon saying, look, the way you kill off the black civil rights movement in this country and the Black Power movement that white folks are scared of and fearful of, and still be able to keep black folk under control and under authorship, under the authority of the power and the police and other forms of authority and governmental laws, is to be able to take the focus off of black folk under public policy of benign neglect and shift the attention away from black folks, shift it to women, immigrants, gays, and immigrants, other groups coming into the country. And that's what they did. And when the liberals said, "Good, we're not threatened by blacks, but since we're not going to do anything for blacks anymore, let's just move away from blacks and we'll take the black leadership with us." They came up with between 1960 and 2016, the public policy of benign neglect morphed into what we call political correctness, which means black folk will still be under authority and be in the watchful eye of white authority, and white authority want to keep black folk monitored and under control with the police department. The police department's primary responsibility is to maintain the status quo. They represent not black folk, they represent the general broader society, the businesses, the military, and that's what I had to do when I was in the Marine Corps, and that's why when I was with all levels of government, when I was with governors and presidents, the primary purpose of the police is to be a smaller brand of the military to keep people being watched, monitored, and keep them and protect the larger society, and particularly the women in the white society. Because see, white women are put into a protected class, and they're trying to protect the white society, and that's been going on. So now, when you get 5 policemen shot, what the black killer is saying is that, and I totally disapprove of what he did, but I'm just saying as an example, what he was saying is I'm tired of it. I'm just sick and tired of the issues of black folk cannot get out of this bag, of this bucket that we've been put into, and nobody pays any attention to us. Every time somebody gets a chance to do something for black folk, whether it was in 1790 or 1860 or in 1960s or the present day, that no political party, not even this time, not even the President of the United States, you got a black one there and a black attorney general and a black in Congress, 40-something blacks in Congress, and a black on the Supreme Court. None of them would do anything specifically to save black folk or to relieve black folk of the burdens that they were put under during slavery. You got to redistribute the wealth and resources back to black folk, and black folk then don't need to be acceptable to whites. The social integration movement has failed. The whole purpose of the civil rights movement and social integration was to try to make black folk appear to be acceptable to whites and not be fearful of whites. And that has failed. They're just as fearful of whites are just as fearful of blacks today as they were during the 1960s.
All right,
and
hold
so
that thought, Doc, because we got to take another break. We're at the top of the hour. I'll let you finish your thought. And also, we got a bunch of folks who want to speak to you at 800-450-7876. Your ticket calls next on 1450 WOL, where information is power. I thank you for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Dr. Claud Anderson. We like to call him the man with a plan. If you've ever tried to figure out why any metric that you use that black folks anywhere on this planet or at the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder, it wasn't by accident. It's by design. We're not inferior to anybody. You know, they're not smarter than us. We've got just enough brains as anybody else. You got to read Dr. Anderson's book. It's a bestseller, not just in the United States, but across this planet. A lot of African countries are now picking it up and figuring it out themselves. It's called Black Labor, White Wealth. There's a race going on. Somebody's got to win. Somebody's got to lose. I keep telling you this. And the other side has figured out that we're going to be the Washington Generals and they're going to be the Globetrotters. We're going to lose every time at everything that we play. They may let one of us win it every now and then, but for the most part, the masses of us are going to be losers. That's what they're trying to do. His second book, Powernomics, is a roadmap to get us out of that quagmire. So before Doc leaves, I'm going to have him give out that number. And by the way, he also has the Harvest Institute, which is the only black think tank. These folks out there, they're sitting there now strategizing how to get us to get up off that $3 trillion that we have. They do that all the time. We don't have one that's except his, called the Harvest Institute, that tries to figure out how to help black folks. So, folks, before Doc leaves, take the number. If you haven't got those books, or if you do, buy them for your friends, because we got to get out of this quagmire. 800-450-7876 to speak to Dr. Claud Anderson. We like to call him the man with a plan. Doc, I'm going to let you continue what you're saying before we take some calls for you.
Right. Okay, Carl. I know I'm drawing all this out. I know you're all tired of listening to this long lecture I'm giving. I'm sorry. I apologize for giving you a long lecture, but it's tremendously important that black folk understand the history and the cause of their dilemma. And so it's one thing to focus on the symbols, but what they need to know what the causes of our problems. And right now, I feel very sorry for white policemen, because white policemen are put in an untenable position. They got to go out there and deal and interact with black folk and the structure, and knowing at the same time they got to carry out those unapplied beliefs, feelings, and hatred that the broader white society feels for black folk, and without being caught into a dilemma like they were caught recently. But see, white police, when they come to a scene and deal with black people and make any contact with black folk, white police officers are just like white people in general. What they see, what they've been taught to see. They see what they are prepared to see. They see what they feel comfortable seeing, and they see, lastly, what they want to see. That's called an implication of perception. What they perceive is what they believe, and how they believe, that's how they act. So right now, black folk have to understand that in dealing with the structure, they got to be able to understand that white police officers are, by and large, trying to take care of the status quo. That's why, as I said, down in Katrina, when those blacks got caught in after the hurricane, and they were left outside on the road for 2 weeks with no food, no water, no medicine, no clothes, no energy, no baths, no hygiene. The federal government and no other government sent any material substantive things down to them. And when help finally came, what did the help do? The help came down there in the form of police, or not police, but police and military. With the military army came down with guns. They came in there to protect the businesses, to prevent any robberies or breaking and entries. Even black folk were trying to steal food or clothing or water. The police were there to protect the property owners. That's one of the primary responsibilities of the police, is to protect the status quo. Now, if the status quo was set up, there was 360 to 400 some years ago, where whites can own and control the predominant amount of everything, the white police officer got no choice but try to use their authority to protect the status quo, and then also be careful and sensitive to the feelings of whites who don't want to be around blacks, who don't trust black folk, who hate and despise black folk, and who are fearful that if black folk ever get anything, that they would seek revenge against whites. Those things are deeply embedded in white society. And one of the disadvantages in most of these urban areas is like Detroit, Michigan, where you go in and got a 92% black population and you got a 65% white police department. You cannot go into any white area in America and find a predominantly white community with a 90 to 100% white community, and they have almost an all black police system over them. They won't do that. They are always sensitive to the fact that they got to protect their own interests, and they are fearful of black folk. And that's why you've never seen, or you very rarely have ever seen in all my lifetime, where a black police officer is using his authority and his weapon and killing whites. They don't do that. And you haven't seen them killing, and even the whites. You don't see the whites shooting Arabs and Asians, and Hispanics and gays and women and Jews. They do it against black folk because black folk are the weakest people, the most disorganized, most diseducated, and they only control less than 1/2 or 1% of anything in value. They have no power. The only thing they can do is to call on civil rights leaders to be able to take them on the marches and demonstrations like the Black Lives Matter. The Black Lives Matter don't understand its history. They don't know what they're looking for and what they're seeking in talking about justice. You cannot get justice unless you got enough power to understand justice comes from those who got the power. And so I'll quit at this point, and I'll take any questions your callers might have, Carl.
All right, 800-450-7876. Go to line 2. Charles, number 3, is calling us in from Washington, D.C. Charles, you're on with Dr. Anderson.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Carl. And, Doctor, I think you did a great background on our current situation. I just want to say I wasn't able to make it over to Power Talk where you were recognized, but I did call your place and order your books, which I've got a question I'll ask later regarding your books. But I wanted to mention, as you just described, how they physically have killed us and are currently killing us. I want to talk about how they're economically are choking us, the black community, or the black neighborhoods and individuals. The banking industry, basically, in every black neighborhood in the country, the values have yet to come back to the pre-housing bubble crash level. And what that means for black people is you don't have equity in your home that you can pull out. What most people start businesses from equity they pull out of their house. Most people pay for their kids' education from equity they pull out of their house, or retirement, or even buy additional real estate. Now, the banks basically or arbitrarily have decided that our home values have not come back, therefore they do not have to issue us loans, and so there's no money really moving through the black neighborhoods, and I think that's deliberate and intentional, as if we're paying for the housing bubble. If you can comment on that, and finally, I've got just a question with your books. As you mentioned, politically, you don't have a dog in the race, and you're not voting for anyone else. And we're often told how, well, the next president will make these Supreme Court justice appointments. Now, I read half of your book. I'm not completely finished, but you very clearly state that the Supreme Court has never, other than the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education, they have worked against us. So if the Supreme Court has a history, why are we being told we've got to get out there to determine who's on the Supreme Court when they've never done anything for us? Thanks for your time, and I'll take that off the air.
Well, let me take your last question first, and thank you for all your support and continued support. And I just love black people like you that are wise, and my heart is wide open, their minds are wide open, they got a vision to try to empower their own people. But see, and the reason it, make that last comment again. It just slipped my mind.
He was talking about the Supreme Court has not done anything for us.
Yeah, right. No, the Supreme Court was never designed to do anything for you. What the Supreme Court has been doing is exercising authority that it does not have. The Supreme Court does not have the authority to be engaging in doing anything that's overruling black folk getting some benefits in the society. And what they've been doing the Supreme Court only has two powers to do three things they can do. They can get involved in ambassadorial appointments, or they can get involved in lower case decision, or where a federal official fails to carry out his responsibility. That's all. But if you go back and look at those the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the 15th Amendment, and those civil rights laws, Congress enacted those laws and mandated that black folk get certain benefits. And in those laws, it says that every level of government, Carl, and is mandated to use all necessary means to lift the burdens and legacies of slavery off the shoulders of black people. I'm going to say that again. It was in those laws. It's been mandated that every level of government use all necessary means to lift the legacies and burdens off the shoulders of black folk. That includes the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court does not have statutory authority to overrule Congress. And what the Congress should have the authority to do right now is to go and try to carry out some of these things by getting reparations for black folks or restitution for black folk, to redistribute some of these resources in black folks' hands, to be able to help get a disproportionate amount of money going into rebuilding black colleges and black universities, to set up industrialization programs in urban black areas. But they're doing just the opposite. What's happening across this nation and what he's asking about is all these urban areas are being gentrified. They're going to gentrify every major city. Those cities were abandoned back in the 1950s, late 1950s, when black folks started talking about social integration, and the Supreme Court approved that. And that even though it was a narrow decision because they didn't want to even approve that. But social integration did not pertain to anything but the schools. But that the civil rights leaders carried it out and applied it to everything. And the only thing that the civil rights laws that those people in South Carolina was looking for when they filed that lawsuit in 1948 and it went to the Supreme Court in 1954, they were not looking for social integration. What they were saying in South Carolina, which was my home area in McClellan, South Carolina, in that time, they were saying that in this area, that white kids are riding to schools on school buses while we walk to school in muddy roads. While for every white child, you're putting $11 or $12 for every white child into the budget, but you're only putting $1.50 in the budget for black kids. We want the same thing that white kids are getting in terms of resources, not to go to the same schools. That every year we get the old hand-me-down books. We get very little equipment. All the white schools got swimming pools. We have to swim in the creek.
Hang on a sec, Doc. We got to take our last look at the traffic and weather. As you know, it's been hot in D.C., almost 100 degrees out there. 800-450-7876. See how long the heat wave's going to last. We'll take your calls for Dr. Claud Anderson next on 1450 WOL, where information is power. And thanks for rolling with us, folks. And our guest, the man with a plan, that's what we like to call him. His name is Dr. Claud Anderson. Again, his books, best-selling books. If you're trying to figure out, if you were just concerned with why we're at the bottom of the barrel, any level, any metric that you can think of, whether it's high school dropout, teenage pregnancy, you just name it, kidney problems, we're at the very bottom. There's a reason. It wasn't by accident, it's by design. In his book, Black Labor, White Wealth, it delineates all of that. Now, his second book, Powernomics, is a roadmap to get us out. But let's let Doc respond to Charles, number 3's question in Washington, D.C. Doc?
Yeah. What I'm going to tell Charles, to make a long story short, I know your time is running out, is that the courts bamboozled black with the 1954 desegregation decision. That was not what blacks in McClellan, South Carolina was appealing for. What they wanted was equal funding, and they wanted the equal amount of material, substantive things, tangible things. I keep telling black folk, do not accept anything, those symbolic or ceremonious things. Black folks should say and demand, we want things that we can measure, that's accountable, that we can take to the bank, and we know exactly what we're getting. And quit going for all this symbolic stuff like, well, we're gonna name a street after Rosa Parks, or we're gonna give you a Martin Luther King birthday. That doesn't put one biscuit on a black person's table. And so black folk got bamboozled, and they're still being bamboozled. And the Supreme Court has never and will never do anything for black folk because they give the impression wearing those black clothing that somehow they're a statue of honesty, integrity, and justice. They're not. They're fixed on maintaining the status quo of what happened to black folk throughout history. They're going to make sure that no resources move from white hands to black hands, and that's why they're against preferential treatment. That's why they're against affirmative actions. That's why against set-aside. That's why they keep saying that they don't want the black folk to be able to do certain things based on skin color. What they're saying is that even though we were very specific in terms of color in putting you in a ditch, we're not going to let you use color to get out of the ditch, and that is something that is detrimental to black folk. We need to get away from it and build your own communities and start building your own businesses and supplying your own people and practicing group economics and group politics.
All right, and he mentioned affirmative action. Doc wrote the first affirmative action measure in the country, actually. Was it for the state of Florida, or was it just for the Miami area?
No, it was for the state of Florida, but it went all over the country, Carl, but my plan was it wasn't really the first affirmative action plan. The real first affirmative action plan was the United States Constitution. That was an affirmative action plan for whites. The one I wrote was the second affirmative action plan but it was the first one that dealt with black folk in the country. I was trying to carry out the definition of affirmative action. Affirmative action is supposed to mean corrective action, correcting something that the government has systematically, customarily done, and legally done to a specific group of people over a prolonged period of time. That's why I wrote the affirmative action plan for black folk, strictly and only for black folk. I did not write it for this political correctness group. I did not write it for genders, for women, for gays, transsexuals, to Eskimos, to Filipinos, to Hispanics and Arabs and Asians. I wrote it for black folk. There is no constitutional or legal justification for having all those groups in an affirmative action program or giving them preferential treatment. But people don't understand that because they don't understand the history of the stuff I just went through with you. So consequently, until this country, until our elected officials and our civil rights leaders fully understand the historical and in a context that they won't get out of unless they try to deal with those problems, you're going to waste your time trying to deal strictly with police shooting blacks. That's why you've never seen any black policemen shooting any whites or anybody else. And that is because blacks are the weakest links, and there's no repercussions coming from shooting and killing beating black folk.
800-450-7876. Go to line 1. Burke's waiting for us in D.C. Burke, you're with Dr. Anderson.
Hey, thanks, Carl. Great show as usual. I listened to Dr. Claud yesterday on the Bev Smith show, and I just wanted to comment on something that he said earlier about, the black communities where you've got 75% black people being controlled by white police officers. There's one aspect of our society where we've got white colleges, predominantly white colleges, where 95% of the athletes for those white colleges are black. And I think, that is something we need to understand and put a stop to because we keep sending...
Burke, do us a favor, Burke. Put it in a question for him so he can respond, because we've got a lot of people want to speak to it.
Well, the question I'm trying to generate is, why are we sending our top black athletes to these white colleges? And, we talk about developing our historically black colleges, but we wouldn't send our black athletes there. Let
me answer that real fast because Carl was trying to move on. It's for the simple right. That's what social integration did. Social integration is a diluting, a watering down process. The Supreme Court did it, and most of the power structure knew that integration would never help black folk. Black folk in McClinton, South Carolina, was looking for desegregation. And when you socially integrated, what you did, your resources, your colleges, your university, your businesses, your neighborhoods, everything that you had, your sports teams, your football team, your basketball teams, your music, your culture, your history, you lost everything when you socially integrated. That's why your colleges, are almost defunct, and all your best players are going to the white colleges.
All right. Thanks, Burke. Thanks for your question. 800-450-7876. Go to Georgia, line 4. Lewis is calling us. Lewis?
Good afternoon, Brother Carl. Very nice show you have. I've been faithfully listening to your show on a regular basis, and my high honors go to Dr. Claud Anderson. Dr. Anderson, I'd like to ask a question.
Sure. Go right ahead.
Are you familiar with Brother Jim Klingman and Brother Alma Fika?
Yeah, I love and admire both of them. They're very bright people, and they're committed to trying to help black folks to the best of their ability. And so, no, I'm supportive of them as a friend and in their efforts to try to help black people.
Okay, I'm one of the state reps in the state of Georgia, and my question to you is, are you familiar with the 1 million conscious black voters and contributors?
No, I'm not a part of it. I know what they want to do, and I'm not a part of that right now. But I do support their efforts, and I trust them, and I hope they don't do anything that would be negative or exploitive of our people, and I pray that they don't.
Not at all. My last question is, have you or will you consider endorsing the movement?
I'll have to think about it. I don't know enough about it other than the fact that they're conscientiously committed to doing something to help black folks. like raising funds. Like right now, for instance, I mentioned earlier that I didn't have a dog in the present race between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, between Sanders and Trump. To be perfectly honest with you, the great irony is that Donald Trump is the only candidate that says he would do something for black folk. And in Powernomics principles, my cardinal rule in Powernomics is never support any candidate that won't promise and contract to do something specifically to deliver black folk from their suffering. And see, right now, I have never in this history ever seen a politician like that run and promise and do something for black folk. Not even Obama in the White House. Nobody does anything for black folk. Nobody ever promises them anything, and nobody ever delivers anything to them. And the great irony is that they call Trump racist, but hell, he's the only one that says, I'm going to do something for black folk. I'm going to go back in these urban cities and build factories and industries so they can build their own businesses and create their own jobs. That's almost like following Powernomics principles. But again, I don't want to endorse Trump, and I'm just saying that's the issue. And so all I want I would vote for anybody if I was voting. I would vote for any candidate, regardless of color or political party, any candidate that promises the most and delivers the most to black people. That's my commitment. I would even make a contract to the devil to support and do something for black folk.
Wow.
You know, we as a people, can I
yeah, go ahead, finish up, because we got a bunch of people who want to get to.
We as a people have more resources than our ancestors back over in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Do you have a solution that we can utilize all of these resources that we have, and possibly we can come up with a Tulsa, Oklahoma, or Black Wall Street?
Yes. My whole plan on that. As a matter of fact, I tried to raise enough capital to have a couple of small mini conventions, or not a full-blown convention, to bring blacks together throughout this country. And I had almost 30,000 to 40,000 blacks that expressed an interest in it. And I got most of the African countries that want to come, and as well as the Caribbean countries, and blacks from France, England, as far away as Ethiopia and Montreal. But the problem is that I tried to raise some capital to be able to hire a planning group to do it. And I waited about, Carl Nelson tell you, about a year and a half to 2 years, asking blacks to donate some funds to the Harvest Institute, your only black think tank in the country, to help so we could fund it and plan it and do it. And do you know, I did not get any money, not one penny, from our so-called black overclass to try to help do the thing. So I told them I'm not going to beg black folk for an opportunity to get out there and be the point man on trying to save the entire damn race by myself. If the blacks in the overclass, they got all the money, all the black singers and dancers and football players, basketball players, that they don't want to put any money into it, fine. I won't care. Because when the wagon comes to get black folk, they're going to get me, but they're going to get every other black too.
All right.
1 million.
We got to keep going because we got a bunch of folks and we're coming up on a break. I thank you for your calls, though. 800-450-7876. Line 6, Juma's calling from Washington, D.C. Juma, you have a question for Dr. Anderson.
Yes. How's it going, everybody? Appreciate the conversation. My question to you all is, you speak about justice, but a lot of times we can't obtain justice because we're not voting the correct members in the court system. How do we go about pressuring our politicians who elect these judges to bring judges that are representative of our people?
Say it again. What did he say, Carl? I didn't hear him.
He's talking about the justice system. How do we go about electing judges, rather?
You mean local judges?
Either local or the Supreme Court.
But see,
the judges are elected
judges on the Supreme Court. They are appointed by whoever the president is, and confirmed by the United States Senate and Senate. You can't vote for them. They have a lifetime job. But
right. So the politicians that we put in place, how do we pressure those guys to elect or adopt judges in the judicial system that are representative?
Hang a second, Juma. As I mentioned, I knew we were coming up on a break. I'll let you formulate your question on the other side. 800-450-7876. To a quick break. Come back as the big show rolls on from 1450 WOL, where information is power. And thanks for staying with us, folks. And our guest, as we like to call him, the man with a plan, Dr. Claud Anderson. 800-450-7876. So back to line 6, Juma in Washington, D.C. Juma, if you got your question ready now for Dr. Anderson.
Yes, I spoke about the judicial system previously, but I had a couple other points that I wanted to mention for Dr. Anderson. The first one was, again, he mentioned Donald Trump saying what he would do for the black folk. How would we go about having guys like him being accountable? They'll promise the black folk this, that, and the next, but when it's time they get in office, they don't deliver.
Well,
So,
let me deal with them one at a time. That's a good question, and see, because right now it's such a good question that it should be self answering. Right now, none of the other candidates have promised you anything, so that means you're not going to get anything from the first place from the others. But at least with him, what I would do, and all this is covered in Chapter 7 in the Powernomics. It got hundreds of recommendations for you in there. That's a good question. What you would do if we had communities like all the other groups in the country have communities, I would call people like Donald Trump and see. And if I knew him right now, I would call him and say, Mr. Trump, let me tell you one thing. If you want the black vote in the country, I can get you a substantive amount of the black vote in America very easily. You tell me, you come to me unless you and I talk. And I'm going to write up a contract of what I want for black people in America. And if you sign this contract, and I'm going to hold you liable and accountable for it, and if you deliver to black folk the way I want you to deliver the things I want delivered to black folk, then I guarantee you I would get out there and campaign for you across this country. But here are the things I want for black folk in this country. I don't want anything symbolic. I don't want anything ceremonious. I don't want anything that's symptomatic. I want tangible, measurable outfits, things that I can count in terms of resources that black folk need, from money, wealth, power, and everything all the way up. If you deliver that to me, you got a deal. I'll deliver the black vote. And you can count. If you got, right now, you got the white vote, you know you can get about 47% of that in any election. Because, see, I ran elections for President Carter in the South. I was a deputy political campaigner for Clinton in Maryland. I ran for campaigns I was a manager for campaigns for governors, for presidents, for attorney generals, and for legislators and congressmen and mayors. I say, I'll get you the votes in America. If you sign this thing, an agreement, a bonding agreement, that you deliver these things to black folk, I'll get you the black vote. And I wouldn't care what anybody else said. I want black folk to have as much wealth and power they need to solve some of these problems. And the problems that have been with us now for 500 years that nobody wants to address. All they want to do is try to talk about, let's get along. There's a time for healing. You can't heal a damn thing unless you go back and solve these problems that were put in place 500 years ago. You call Donald Trump or any other candidate into your community, put him on the stage and say, you got 5 minutes to tell me exactly in specific terms what are you going to do for black folk that we can measure. And after the first 2 to 3 years in your office, we want you to come back before us and tell us in manageable terms and show us what you've done and produced along those lines. And by the end of your term, if you have not produced, we're going to raise holy cane to bring your butt out of office, to pull you out through a recall you out of office. And if you're in the White House and we can't recall you, we're going after every major supplier, everybody who supported you. If it was Burger King and McDonald's or Ford Motor Car Company that put you in office, would provide you with the money, we're going to start boycotting them and withholding patronage with them. We're going to put some pressure on you. Black folk are going to hold any and everybody accountable who will not deliver for the black race. And we will not support anybody, anything, any candidate, any public office that would not publicly commit to doing something for black folk. That's what black folks should be doing right now.
Doc, let me jump in and ask you this. So if Trump says, okay, what is it you want? What do you tell him? What is it we want?
Can he hear you?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
No, yes. This is for Dr. Anderson.
Okay.
Doc, if Trump says, okay, what black people, what do you want? What do you tell him? Because you told him that you want something specific.
Oh yeah, I was saying the same thing I said before. First, I want him to understand that black folk now ought to be known as the exceptional people in this country, the people that have been untreated like any other group, that built this country and laid the foundation for it. That's one thing. And secondly, I want to make sure they're put into a protected class, similar to women Indians, that they're protected, that they get benefits at first cut. I want to make sure that the affirmative action plan in this country is reduced to nobody but black folk, not all these other fabricated minorities that now getting all the benefits instead of black folk. Fourthly or fifthly, I want you to fulfill the mandates of the 1866 Indian Treaty, which says up front that black folks should have gotten everything, the black descendants and black Indians should have been getting all the things that so-called white $5 Indians is getting, and that Obama has been giving them benefits for the last 8 years in the White House, $3.5 billion every year, and all the free radio and TV stations they've been getting. I want to, after I say fulfill the 1866 Indian Treaty, I said now I want you to go back and come up with a special plan to identify every major urban area. That 70% of all the black people in America live in and around 10 large metropolitan areas. I want you to go in there and industrialize those cities. And I want you to build factories and all of the vertical businesses that black folk can own. I want you to set up pools of money. I want you to set up the redevelopment capitals, cores in every one of those cities where black folk can go in and borrow long-term money at low interest rates, revolving loan funds at interest rate no more than 1% or 1.5%. I want you to be able to set up a special commission to go back and find me and pay black folk for the 35 to 50 million dollars that was stolen out of the freedmen's banks back in between 1866 and 1872. I can go on and on, Carl. I got all kind of things I want. I want black folks to be getting all the major benefits that all these immigrants are getting coming into the country right now. I want him to set up special laws so when immigrants come into this country, they pay a tax. They pay a tax, and that tax money goes into the black communities to help build black businesses and black homes and to keep down and set a tax base of black. That immigrants can't keep pouring into this country, getting free rides and getting unearned benefits. You want me to keep going, Carl?
No, that's fine. I just wanted you, because, it's not just Trump or Hillary, anybody who's running for office, but for that matter. So I don't want people to think that, we're just aiming at Donald Trump, but anybody who's running for office, especially on a national level, and that you gave us some pointers, just in case any of you folks who are listening get a chance to speak to one of those folks who are running for office, you've got some ammunition. Juma, I'm going to let you finish up.
Tell Trump to call me. I'll negotiate for black folks.
And Hillary as well. I don't want people to think that
I'll negotiate with Hillary Clinton. Either one. I'll negotiate with either one of them. If they talk to me, I'll say, I'm not in politics anymore, but I'll negotiate with you and cut deals with you on behalf of black folk. But these are the kind of things I'm going to give you a whole list of things I won't put on the table because of blacks' unique, exceptional experience for 500 years in the country. They're the oldest population. 99% of all the black people in America are the direct descendants of slaves, which means they were here before 99% of all the other people in the country ever arrived. They're entitled to certain appreciation and respect and resources, and I'm going to demand that they get them.
All right, Juma.
Just one last question. Doc,
but did I answer
hear a lot of discussion about economic empowerment of blacks, and there's a push to take money out of the banks, the big banks, and put them into black banks. But a lot of small business owners that I know who are African American, they say when they go to industrial bank, Citizens Bank, these so-called black banks, they can't get their loans approved, and they're overqualified. What can you say to people that are experiencing these difficulties and moving their money around but not getting the results that we want to get?
Well, I just gave you one hint. I said I would set up Development Corporation, which is part of my national plan, revolving funds in them that is subordinatable to any major loan from for any standardized lending institution. But in addition to that, I would go to all these major black churches, even though about 38% of them right now are going into foreclosure because they fail to take care of their people not the way they should have. But have all these various black churches, get rid of half of them. You got 65,000 black churches and 122,000 black ministers in the United States that are producing absolutely nothing. And they bring out about $65 billion in pockets money from these black parishioners every Sunday or every year annually. I'll put that money into saving and loans and clubs in the biggest banks. Have these black churches emerge and set up a big black churches where black folk can borrow their money and buy land and everything else and have land banks in them. There are all kind of things that black folk can do if they learn to start respecting and appreciating their own people and cease and desist and trying to socially integrate and trying to get along with all these other groups at the expense of their own people.
All right, Juma, thank you for your call.
Appreciate
800-450-7876, line 2. Sandra's waiting for us. She's also calling from the district. Sandra, and we Dr. Anderson.
Hi, Carl and Dr. Anderson. Dr. Anderson, you're my type of guest. Why do black people? Why do we spend so much time trying to change white people's behavior, knowing that the only behavior we can't truly control is our own?
Well, see, because that's foolishness on black folks' part. Mm-hmm. They always want something that's always way off in the distance, mm-hmm. because they've been taught to see things upside down and backwards. That came out of what they call the slave code of 1705. The same slave code of 1705 told black folk it's like a two-sided coin. One side was a teach, and the slave code taught how white folk were to view black folk and treat black folk, and on the other side of the coin it taught black folk how they were to see themselves and treat themselves. And then it says that black folks should always aim to be like whites. And when black folk foolishly bought into that myth or that stupidity, that's like standing in front of a mirror and you try to be like whites, and you're looking in the mirror and you see whites in the mirror and you see yourself there. You want to be like him. So when you're looking in the mirror, you raise your right hand and you think you're raising your left because the mirror is the left hand. So black folk have been taught to see everything upside down and backwards. And so what they want to do is think they can enlighten themselves, not by creating their own communities, their own businesses, their own wealth, and their own tax base and taking care of their own people. They want to be a guest in what whites own, and the whites have taken advantage of that and made blacks permanent guests in America. And when they should be saying we are the original people, everybody else here are the guests.
And they think politicians are going to help them to discipline police. I'd like to hear your comments on that.
On what now?
they think politicians are going to help them to discipline the police, to write legislations to discipline police. I want your opinion on that.
Carl, repeat what she's saying to me.
She says that they think that the politicians are going to legislate the police. Some of our folks think that's
discipline them through legislation.
Using legislation to discipline the cops.
To suspend them?
Discipline.
So to discipline them?
Yeah.
No, see, that's almost a waste of time. See, black folk had their own communities with their own people. That's why, like, for instance, the Chinese, let me give you an example. Chinatown was one of the big examples. When the Chinese came into the United States, they built Chinatown out in San Francisco. They did not allow white policemen to come into Chinatown because they had their own community. And what they did, they set up a code of conduct which says that in Chinatown, we don't need white policemen in here, beat up and cutting up and shooting our people. We'll take care of our own people. And the code of conduct says that any Chinaman in Chinatown, if you get caught violating another Chinaman or reaping and robbing and doing it our people, you better get out of town before the sun goes down.
All right, hold that thought, Doc. We got to take a quick break here, right here on 1450 WOL, where information is power. Thanks for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Dr. Claud Anderson. His best-selling books, you got to read them, Black Labor, White Wealth, and Powernomics. Before we go back to Doc, your friend from L.A., Brother Jamal, wants to know, he says, how do you negotiate with no leverage? He says, you must know something that no one else knows. He says, if you can finish the Chinatown story if you want, but I'd like you to tackle Brother Jamal's question about, because you talked about
ask me that question. Let me finish that and I'll answer that question. Okay, first of all, most of these towns all had a code of conduct, just like Chinatown did. And in Chinatown, they had a couple of groups. One was called the Hatchet Men, the other called the Tongues. And they had a general rule that said if you do anything and violate the people in Chinatown, you had to get out of town before the sun went down. Or if you didn't, you wound up floating in the bay. They enacted that code, so that way they didn't need white policemen overrunning and exercising authority in Chinatown. Then eventually, sort of having their own little local Chinese cops or policemen in their town, and that this resolve their problems. We are the only people let people come into our town, give them a badge, give them a club, and give them a gun, then pay them to oversee us as a point of authority. And so when white folks do you in as police, then you pay them to do it. And other groups had other approaches. For instance, in some of these towns, like when I was in government, in towns, they had organized entities. The mafia, for instance, protected a lot of these communities and protected a lot of the businesses. And people said that, if you do this to this community, do that to this business, the mafia is coming after you, and you'll be floating in the bay. We're the only people who don't have a code of conduct. Instead of having a code of conduct about how we protect our own people, support our own people, buy from our own people, and look out for our own people, our code of conduct in the community is nothing but saying something like, well, go for yourself and do your own thing, which doesn't work. It does not allow you to function as a team, as a group. Now, you have somebody from Jamal and from somewhere.
Jamal, your friend out in L.A. He says, how do you negotiate with no leverage? Says you must know something that nobody else knows.
Well, he's absolutely right. I do. That's why I wrote all my books, and they didn't write the things I wrote in my books. It's very simple. You do have leverage, but you're not exercising and using it. You got 43 million black folk in this country. If black folk were to withdraw from all levels of politics, to get away from the Democratic Party and get away from the Republican Party and vote and create their own independent party, as an example, and say we will vote as a solid block, 43 million strong, to whoever votes for and supports and would deliver the most benefits to black people. At that point in time, don't run any candidates for that political office. Just say we'll vote and deliver those votes. What that means to the white society is that the white society says, you mean tell me right now I could pick up all those black votes by simply doing something for black folk? That's all they need. For instance, the white conservatives, they can say, hey, we can get 40, like Donald Trump, we can get 47% of the white vote right now. If we can pick up all these black votes, he can be the president tomorrow. But I said, that's power. You tell Jamal that's power. That is leverage. You can leverage your votes, you leverage your bodies in politics. You're outnumbered right now in politics 9-1. 9 will go over 1, 9 times with nothing left over. Black folk are just silly playing politics, trying to vote by giving your vote, splitting your votes between the Republican and Democratic Party, hoping somehow you're going to impress them. You know you don't have any leverage because you're split up. You're not playing as a team. Racism is a team sport. You either play as a team or you lose by default. But black folk cannot get that through their head. I don't know why they're so difficult for them to understand that. Racism is a team sport. That's why we've never won a game, never gotten any scores on the board. That's just in politics. If you were to say we're going to go out here now and play as a team, and we would support and go for whoever promises the most and delivers the black folk. The same thing is true in business. You got an annual disposable disposable income that is something like makes you about the 9th or the 10th richest nation on earth. but you're so scattered doing social integration, you never spend your money the way you're supposed to. And you never practice group economics. Right now, out of every dollar that black folk get, they spend 97% of it outside their communities and other folks' business. They can only keep 3% of that money inside their own communities. They put 2% of it, that 3% is divided between either Asian, Chinese, or Arabs or businesses. The 97% go to white businesses. As soon as a black person gets paid, he runs straight to a business that is not a black business. Group economics says you get your leverage by practicing group economics, spending your money with your own people. Hispanics spend their money 6 to 7 times in their own communities with their own people in their own hands. White spend their money 8 to 12 times with their own people in their own hands. Arabs and Asians spend their money 13 to 14 times. Jews spend their money 18 times. Black doesn't spend their money 1 time because we're so busy trying to be acceptable and trying to get along with others. No, we don't have any leverage because we keep spending our money and giving our money away. For every dollar that you put into someone else's hand, you flush another $11 down the toilet. We don't use our leverage. We can use our leverage in politics. We can use our leverage in business and money. We can also use our leverage in social issues by saying we are exceptional people. There's nobody in this country that should be equated to black folk. Black folk are the oldest people here. They're the only people, the original people on the earth. They're the most patriotic people. They're the only people in this country that's fought in every war with this country in defense of this war and whose mother country's never gone to war. They should use that as leverage in demanding issues from the government. We're the most patriotic. But instead, they let the Confederates coming up from the South waving Confederate flags saying that they're the most patriotic. They are not. They are the first terrorists in the country. And black folk, the leverage that blacks do have, they don't use it. And just like they did with the colleges, and they gave up their colleges, they gave up their hospitals, they gave up all their disposable income. We have leverage, but we are not organized. We don't have a plan, and we don't use it. Jamal, I hope you understand that.
That's some real talk right there. Doc, before we go to Rick in Ontario, tell folks how they can get your books and how they can contact the Harvest Institute.
Well, right. Well, okay, they can get the books, and most of my books will contain most of the things that I'm telling black folk. I've been telling them this for all my years and experiences in politics, government, and businesses. And I have, and Jamal was right. The things that the rest of them didn't know. I have been very unique in this sense. I'm the only black that I know of in the history of this nation that has been from the lowest level to the highest level in everything, in politics, in business, in education, and the things I've done, no other black has done in the country. And I think I owed it to black folk to use those experiences to try to help them. I never seen any other blacks do that. So what I want to do then is to say you can get these things this information by going and buying the books, Black Labor, White Wealth. With that book, there's and Powernomics, the National Plan, and the Two Dirty Little Secrets books that tells you unknown things that you should know about black folk and little factoid stories that have never been presented. You can get all 4 of these books in a power pack for $70 by either going to the Powernomics website. Powernomics, POWERNOCOMCICS, Powernomics.com, and you can order them off the website. Or you can call the major office for a Powernomics office. That telephone number is 301-564-6075. Again, it's 301-564-6075. That's the Powernomics Corporation. You can order books through that. These books will give you and tell you everything you possibly need to know and want to know about black politics, about black economics, about black folks' inappropriate behavior patterns, or things that black folk that nobody's ever printed about black folk, and dirty little secrets about black history, black heroes, and other troublemakers. You can get all these documents, and the new book coming out soon is called The Black Reader. You can get all this information. No other books have this kind of information in it. These books are unlike any other books. And if you want to read it, and you want to understand it, you can start dealing with some of these problems and not be bamboozled as we have been bamboozled for the last 500 years. We're not going to solve the police problems and with the black community as long as we keep focusing on the symptoms rather than the causes of our problems.
All right, and Brother Jamal says he agrees with you, by the way. But let's go 800-450-7876. Let's go to Rick. Rick's calling us from Ontario, Canada. He's on line 1. Rick, you're on with Dr. Anderson.
Thanks, Carl. I really tried not to call this early in the week, but this is such a uplifting presentation, and I've heard it, and every time I hear something that I didn't hear before, and I want to thank Dr. Anderson for his effort. I don't want you to think, brother, that because the numbers haven't come, that you're not getting to the right ears. I thank
you for that, because I get disappointed, I get angry sometimes. I love black folks.
I know you do. Well, that's what my grandfather used to say. That's what my granddad used to say. That's what happens when you're doing the Lord's work, however you want to take it. But I got 3 quick points I want to make.
Okay.
And this is a rhetorical question, but there's one thing that we haven't consistently done to stop these people from thwarting our human uplift and right to move about this earth unmolested. I'm just going to put out a couple names, Robert Williams and the Deacons for Defense, and I'll let that go wherever it needs to go. Second point is white women are the most underestimated players in the bigotry that we face. They are the driving force behind white supremacy because by nature, they are the ones that teach it to their children. And damn near every black man who was lynched, white women were not only the impetus, but they were there cheering it on. So I'm saying black women have been co-opted into thinking that because they have vaginas like them, that they somehow should have some allegiance to them because they're women. They were the ones who caused your great-grandfathers to swing on the trees and have their testicles and penis cut off at their pleasure. Third point, at this point, those black people who do survive this period, and I agree with you, man, if something doesn't happen, we will be a permanent underclass. But those who survive this period will be like the smart ones who Harriet Tubman and those other black men and women helped escape this place so they could live free. I feel that there's a tremendous amount of misery on this way because black people seem to believe that it is just an oversight that for 400 years we have been manipulated, legislated, forced, and otherwise made to live subservient at the very bottom rung, as you stated, of this so-called culture. So when TSHTF, I hope people know what that means because white folks are sure gearing up for it, the people who have the knowledge and the will to protect and feed themselves have a possibility of surviving. Otherwise, like Gunnar Myrdal said in The American Dilemma, he said, all sudden and violent changes, whatever their cause or character, must tend to decrease the respect for status quo.
Rick, let's give him a chance to respond because we're racing the clock right here. Thank you for your call. Doc?
Yeah, well, there's not very much to respond to. That gentleman just about summarized everything he said, everything that needs to be said. He did a good job.
All right, and another call.
And basically what he's saying, even with the women, is that and our black women do get trapped in that trap that he's talking about, based on what's called vagina dialogue, and comparing genders, and whether it's transgender or any kind of gender with black racism is like trying to compare a headache with cancer. Yes, it might be a headache being a woman, but it's cancer as being black in our society.
Wow. 800-450-7876. Go to Ann Arbor, Michigan, line 6. Donna's waiting for us. Donna, you're on with Dr. Anderson.
Thanks for taking my call. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. Make it quick.
Yeah, hi, Dr. Anderson. My question for you. I'm from a Caribbean background, and I would like to know, what do you think immigrants who are migrating from the Caribbean, should they be also subjected to this immigrant tax that you refer to?
Yeah, well, you mean African Americans coming in from the Caribbean?
Yes.
Yeah, they should come in and try to join with blacks in America. But again, but their past experiences are totally different. But they are brothers of the skin, and but they have different experiences from black folk. They're coming to this country voluntarily. They're coming here, with a language. They're coming here with a culture. They're coming here with the opportunity to create new businesses. And they come here with the ability to leave here and go back home to the Caribbean or get letters or mails from the Caribbean. Blacks in America are totally different. They were cut off. And so that's why I don't call blacks in America African Americans. There's a difference between an African American and a black American. Blacks in America are totally unique human beings. Any and everybody coming to America since human beings originated in Africa and they migrated out of Africa into Asia, into Europe. Anybody who comes to America to live is an African American. But black people are not African Americans. They were born in this country. They've never had any experience except this. They never were colonized on the colonial system. They didn't have a language and history and had their own. They are different people. They were denied everything from food to family to institution to religion to education. They are different. But when the Caribbeans come in, people from the African Americans from the Caribbean come in, they need to partner with black folk and stick together and be a part of the larger community. And together they can build strong, viable communities and good schools and culture together.
We got to go. Donna, thank you for your call. We got to go. We're out of time, flat out of time, folks. Doc, I thank you for your day again, but we got to leave. Stay strong, stay positive, stay in the light. See you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.